Hello and welcome to Chat DPS, where this week Robert, Adam, and myself will be talking about Vinomofo and Sesame Op. There's a couple of things that have been going on around the press and media around these two particular items in the news. So we'll be highlighting some of our thoughts around that. First and foremost, though, let's go to Vinomofo. So apparently the Privacy Commissioner, Carly Kind, she's found that the wine wholesaler Vinomofo interfered with the privacy of almost 1 million individuals by failing to take reasonable steps to protect the personal information it held from security risks, which ultimately led to a data breach. So this is talking about this Principle 11.1 to the Privacy Act, and we're getting a few observations coming out, and the OAIC are pretty much on point on this at this moment in time. And I think it would be fair to suggest in a minute, Robert, that this is the Privacy Commissioner making people aware of their responsibilities. I think is probably a very polite way of doing it. Scapegoating might be another one. And so the Privacy Commissioner observed that Vinomofo's culture and business posture failed to value or nurture attention to customer privacy, as exemplified by failures regarding its policies and procedures, training, and cultural approach to privacy. In concluding, Vinomofo contravened the Privacy Act. So walk us through this, because I know that there are some bigger picture sort of things that sit behind this. I mean, what actually has been going on here? Because it doesn't sound as if it's been very responsible.
Yeah, I guess from a Vinomofo point of view, from a security point of view, not a lot. It's probably the summary. And I'm sure Adam will comment on it later in terms of what they did or didn't do. But I think what's interesting, just for a bit of context, we spoke about Australian clinical labs a few weeks ago, and so just in terms of comparison, I think Australian clinical labs is about 10 times the revenue of Vinomofo, and in terms of the number of individuals whose data was exposed, I think Australian clinical labs was around 200,000. And this one is closer to 1 million. Smaller company, much bigger data breach. Australian clinical labs got fined around $5 to $6 million. The outcome of this one at the moment is a number of declarations around requiring Vinomofo to put systems, controls in place that they should have done several years ago. So the declarations are all about, okay, well, you didn't have logging and you didn't have, whatever other controls in place. Put those in place in the next 90 days, then go get that reviewed. If there's any gaps, go fix those, and then report back to the OAIC. And then maybe there'll be some further steps that are taken. So there's no explicit dollar penalties here. It's go fix all of this stuff. And it might be that for maybe a small organization, still 70-odd million annual revenue, that they're going to have to spend probably $500,000, $1 million on implementing all of this stuff anyway. That might be seen as sufficient in terms of cost. Obviously, this has been going on for a couple of years, this investigation. But I guess it doesn't preclude the commissioner from coming back and imposing some penalties later. But so that's the high level. I mean, again, in summary, basically what happened was they were going through a data migration piece at Vinomofo. They were moving to a new platform, and as part of the data migration steps, they took 1 million users' personal information and they put it onto this temporary database. This temporary database had no controls over it, no logging, no visibility from a security point of view. I think some Russian hackers got into that database, exfiltrated the data. They contacted Vinomofo, asked for ransom, posted everything on the dark web, and at which point, once Vinomofo realized this was real, then they contact the OAIC and say, look, we've got an eligible data breach, and the investigation goes on from there. And then OAIC starts asking questions. What controls have you got in place? What's your technology like? What training did you guys do? What's your culture like? And that's where the story kind of falls apart for Vinomofo. Sorry, did you want to say something?
So culturally bankrupt, maybe?
Well, not
culturally bankrupt, maybe?
Not bankrupt, but I mean, I think that they were lacking in terms of their training, the necessary culture. So one of the things you might find it amusing that was called out in the report from the commissioner was that their privacy policy was put under a section on the website called the boring bits. So it was basically suggesting that, everything else about the website, which is all about buying wine, that's all the fun stuff. By the way, and now we get to, if you got this far, here's all the boring legal and privacy stuff that you need to know about. So that was called out as being part of, the wrong sort of culture. And they've updated their privacy policy since then to get rid of the boring stuff. And I think they're also called out in not prioritizing upgrading their security controls and technology. So they're based down in Melbourne. They were affected by the COVID lockdown, and they said that when they needed to get back up and running, they needed to upgrade their telephone system. So they prioritized upgrading their telephone system. They said, well, they couldn't do that and upgrade the security controls. And the commissioner wasn't having a bar of that either. They have tried to, as you read through the full report, they have tried to get out of some of this stuff. They've tried to argue a few points about, you made some updates to the Privacy Act and that weren't there at the time of the breach. And the commissioner's come back and said, no, the overall principles of protecting people's personal information has been there all along. And we've released some guidelines since then, but basically that doesn't get away from the responsibilities that you should have had. And when you come down to people, process, and technology, the three core things, Vinomofo failed on all three. And that's why the finding was against Vinomofo, and they need to really up their game in terms of those things and get on with fixing people, process, and technology. It all seems like common sense, and when you look at the sort of stuff they did or didn't do, you kind of think, how can they just not even be thinking about their customer data? And that's part of what the commissioner says. Like, as your business grows, and obviously they're an e-commerce business, and you start collecting more and more personal information, when it comes to what are reasonable steps, you actually have to look at that and go, oh, the risk has increased. You actually have to introduce governance. You have to actually introduce risk registers. You actually have to appoint the right people. They didn't have the right people in place anyway. And you have to take this seriously. And here's a consequence. So we've seen Australian clinical labs. We've seen Vinomofo. We know there's others in the pipeline. Again, it's a message. Maybe only e-commerce platforms will hear this. But basically, any small business, any business that turns over more than $3 million, they're in the sight of the commissioner and other regulators.
They're in the mix.
And these warning shots keep getting fired out. So if I was a business in e-commerce or anything else, if I'm captured by the Privacy Act, I need to be doing more. I mean, that's clearly the message. And the regulators are getting serious. So that's the key message here.
So I buy wine, but I mean, I don't think I've been fortunate in that I haven't bought any from Vinomofo by the sound of it. If I thought for 1 second that my information was being treated in that manner, I don't think I'd be too happy. How about you, Adam? I mean, sort of like how this must have a view on this. I mean, this is rights, responsibilities,
Look, from an operations perspective, if they had a chief security officer, this would be a shit show, obviously. The issue that we have here is not only is it an e-commerce business, I would say that it is a logistics business, first and foremost, e-commerce second. And the problem with it and the logistics industry as a whole is the first most important thing is, how do I get product to place? And cybersecurity doesn't help get product to place. So when you have a company full of logistics-minded people running it, this is where this goes down. And most of these businesses, any type of logistics, whether it's long haul or flight or wine, they have the same issue, right? You build in people that'll make your business profitable and will get product to market, and you unfortunately don't always focus on these things. I think the awareness of this type of an incident will be really, really good. It will be interesting to see what they come up with as a way towards becoming more secure, and how that reflects on the industry of both e-commerce and logistics, two areas that are a bit lacking.
It's going to run, isn't it? I mean, this is, because I'm not being funny or anything, but I mean, there are a lot of Vinomofos out there, right? I mean, a lot of morally and ethically bankrupt people that don't really give a damn about the personal data that they're holding. There are a lot of people out there that do. So, I mean, credence and credibility to those guys. And those are the kind of people that we really do want to be doing business with, because they take their customers seriously. I mean, and that's the only thing that I can take away from this, is the fact that, I want to deal with an organization that takes its responsibilities seriously, instead of understanding all of its rights and negating all of its responsibilities.
I would just say one thing slightly less to the level in which you said yours. I would say in the old version of the words, there's a lot of ignorance out there when it comes to what's needed to do and the type of data that's actually protected. So because of that ignorance, and because people aren't going out to find advice from either legal or cybersecurity ends, it's that advice that needs to breach this gap across the board. And because if you're ignorant of a subject, then you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it's actually acknowledging the fact that you don't know what you're doing. I mean, it's and I'm not being funny or anything. People know the difference between right and wrong, right? I mean, if it's right that you have a big Ferrari to drive around in, but you don't actually, have any insurance on it, then that's irresponsible, right? So I mean, it's in the same kind of vein, right? I guess moving on, you've got some an interesting story about Sesame Op. So what's been going on with Sesame Op, Adam? Because this one, this is a bit technical, isn't it?
This is interesting. So this one came out of Microsoft themselves. What they're calling Sesame Op is a weaponization of legitimate OpenAI API services to create command and control operations. So what that means is they're able to utilize the API that people use every single day to be able to make a master in the cloud and send control and commands to your infrastructure that it will run, which is really, really interesting. Now, what happened with this one? It's before everyone freaks out too much. So first of all, the attacker was in the system for well over 6 months, completely undetected. So they had long-term surveillance and they did a lot of data exfiltration. They had obviously an undetected presence for a long time, which is quite interesting. There's no extra info other than that. And their target was obviously sensitive data and intellectual property. The fact that this was done as a way to pull data in what looked like a legitimate fashion is what's really, really interesting. And this goes back to, we spoke about AI last week. I was going to say yesterday, last week. And it's really important for people to understand that if you're going to utilize AI, and generative AI in particular, if you're going to utilize it in your product or for your customers or to handle sensitive data, you've got to remember that there's two sides to it. The OpenAI cloud component is built to be very, very unbiased and will give you a bunch of answers and has a lot of connections out into the internet. You can also get the same models and utilize them locally or in your own cloud. And then you can create the model and the answers to be as biased as is humanly possible. So every time you ask a question, it gives you the correct answer, the same answer every single time instead of a different answer. So if you have your own instances off the internet that you're utilizing and training yourself from a business perspective, this type of attack can't hurt you.
Right. Okay, then. So I mean, what this is actually suggesting is that we really do need to have what we've been saying for the last, I don't know how many weeks now. Let's have a policy around this. Let's actually understand exactly where this data is, understand who's putting what into where, and what you should be doing, so that we can actually be clear and comfortable about the fact that we're not oversharing information with people who have no right to see that information.
It's the same as
fair?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. It's like what Richard said yesterday. Have an outcome that you're going towards, build a plan, and then go forward. Because once you have a plan and an outcome, you can rationalize the risks. So in this case, can our service be weaponized against us? And if it can, what kind of policies should we have in place around usage? What kind of scrutiny should we have around vendor relationships? What kind of compliance should we put in for assurance that our vendors are doing what they say they are? Should we pull back from the cloud and do it ourselves?
Yeah, this whole thing around, sort of like this cloudification, sort of like and then pushing that out. I mean, where does this data live? Understanding what data you've got, where it actually lives, who's got access to it. So access management, identity in terms of being able to prove that you're the right person in order to be able to view that data, whether it's just view it or whether it's read and write to it. I mean, are those are things that are kind of like really important. So
Yeah.
it's beginning to come out now. So this is, I mean, the tech company itself, actually coming out and saying, hey, maybe what we should be doing is something just a little bit different, maybe.
I think it's interesting to start thinking about it less like a product and more like a service. If you have like a
Yeah.
managed service provider and they're managing your infrastructure for your customers, you want to know who has access, where's the data, where are the people. You want to make sure that you've got all of your assurance places in check. If you think of generative AI platforms in the same way, those same controls almost mirror exactly on what you need.
Yeah. Yeah. Robert, did you have any thoughts around this? Because, I mean, this is the generic thing again about understanding, having a policy around something. Yeah. I mean, it's sort of like understanding where your data is, who's using it, what they're using it for, and what have you. Is it's the same thing that you've been talking
Yeah,
about for
yeah.
weeks and months now. Yeah.
I'll just
Broken
keep
record?
repeating this. Just keep repeating this till I'm blue in the face, I guess. Have an AI framework in place. Have an AI policy in place. Have appropriate governance, risk frameworks. Actually work through this. Figure out what your risks are. And look, and what's good about these sorts of incidents is you can go, oh, this has come up. Okay, we need to
Yeah.
update our risk register. Okay, so we have these new risks around Gen AI. What controls are we going to put in place to try and mitigate this risk and actually work this through? So you should be taking these real world examples and updating
Yeah.
your policies, processes, and procedures in real time, because things like generative AI, these models, they're updating incredibly fast. So you can't just sit back and look at this every 6 months or 12 months. You need to be looking at this on a much more frequent basis. And when you have key risks like this, which are known, you actually need to, as a matter of urgency, go look at your risks and actually do something about it.
Yeah, I think this is, I mean, I've been working in technology field now for, 25, 30 years or something. And I have to say that, I mean, maybe it's just me being older, I don't know. But I mean, the pace of technology at this moment in time is so much faster than I've ever witnessed it before. This AI boom is quite extraordinary in terms of what it's doing and the risks that it's actually putting out there. I mean, it's doing some wonderful things, don't get me wrong, but I mean, the productivity side of it is only good in certain verticals. It's not necessarily true in others. It's kind of patchy in terms of how it's actually working, whether it's working well. But I don't think, I mean, there are a lot of people getting very rich out of AI generically, but I'm not sure that there are people out there that have gotten that rich by using AI in a particular fashion just yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I think the
Maybe.
key
Well,
message from it, the key
the
message.
internet side of things. You go.
I was going to say, sorry. I was going to say the key message is for me: you cannot set and forget. That is the key thing.
No.
You can't just go, we're just going to put this tool in and
Yeah.
we're just going to let it go. You have to be vigilant constantly.
Adam, the last word will go to you, my friend.
The biggest thing to remember is when it comes to this type of generative AI, by itself, it's not a product. It's just data analytics. It's a front end for data analytics. And
Yes.
what's the type of things that you think about when you think about where your data is? They're the same things you should think about when you look at utilizing any type of generative AI.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so much that sort of sits behind all of that in terms of the ease of use, ease of access, and again, the yin and the yang, sort of like trying to work out what your rights are and then what your responsibilities really should be. Gentlemen, thank you ever so much. I think that's pretty much one of the last ones for the year. I think next week we're having a retrospective. So look forward to catching up with you then with a few stories that we can all share and have a laugh about. Maybe even some bloopers that we can pull out of the hat. Maybe Charlie will be kind to us. Gents, thanks very much indeed. That was Chat DPS.